Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fourth meeting of the Planning and Environment Committee. I'd like to start off with saying that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternative formats and communication supports for Council standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility at london.ca or 519-661-2489 extension 2425. So with that, I'd like to move on and ask the committee any disclosures of pecuniary interest. I see none. Moving on to number 2, consent. Any items that you would like pulled, comments, or I'd like a motion to maybe Councillor Cassidy.
I have a question for staff on 2.2, the EPAC report. I'm not sure. I don't think I need it pulled, but I have a question for staff on that report.
And if I could have someone respond.
I haven't asked the question.
Oh, darn it, sorry. Just a little bit ahead of myself here. Sorry about that, Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is, sorry, I have to find the item. There was an item in the report that seemed to me that it was, there it was. It seemed to be almost a gentle way of directing staff, and I'm just wondering what the response from staff is. And it's from the report of EPAC, it's item 6.2 regarding the Byron gravel pit secondary plan, that civic administration be advised that a portion of the Byron gravel pit be preserved for species at risk, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just looking for a response from staff about that, which seems to me to be directing staff.
Through the chair, the Byron gravel pits right now are going through a secondary planning process. The draft natural heritage resource work has just been done. It did identify the potential of barn swallow habitat in some of the banks. I would take this not so much as direction, but just reminding us that part of that, but certainly species at risk habitat by policy are to be protected. And the bulk of those bank areas would not be developable anyway, given the nature of the slopes. So it's highly likely that as a result of the secondary planning process, these lands would all be identified as open space and that habitat would be preserved, which would have to be anyway as a species at risk habitat.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to hear that from staff. So with that, I'll be happy to move the consent items, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And if the committee just may allow me to make a comment on, just following up on Councillor Cassidy's inquiry on the EPAC report. I found this report very informative on a number of projects and was just wondering if there's an opportunity or what we do here at planning when we receive EPAC's reports. Are they can they be attached to application websites or other opportunities like that we have, like get involved for information? And I'm just wondering if there is an opportunity to do that, or what the process is once we approve the consent items here at committee.
Through the chair, so what we do with the EPAC comments is they are reflected in the planning report that comes before you. So the EPAC comments are itemized. The consultants do respond to the comments that are provided by EPAC as well. Historically, we haven't put them individually on the city's website for the various applications. Something we could explore. It might not be something we can get to right away, but it's definitely something we could take a look at.
Thank you for that, and I would definitely encourage you to explore that. It's just a lot of information, detailed information, and it's just information there to be used, I guess, with the public as well. So with that, I do have a motion, Councillor Cassidy, approving the consent items. I need a seconder. Deputy Mayor Helmer. And with that, we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
And moving on to the scheduled items, we have a public participation meeting, not to be heard before 4, so our timing is good, on 240 Oakland Avenue. I need a motion to open up the public participation meeting. Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Turner, and if we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
And if we could go to staff for a presentation.
Madam Chair, before Life begins, I just wanted to do a quick introduction. I don't think I need to formally introduce Life to this group, as he's been here before in his work at Planning Division and City Planning. But middle of 2018, Life joined us in Development Services and is one of our newer site development planners. So this is his first official public site plan meeting, so I just wanted to introduce him in this capacity. So, thank you.
Thank you, and welcome, Mr. Maitland.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. In front of committee tonight, we have the public site plan meeting for 232 240 Oakland Ave. It's in response to an application by Bluestone Properties. Just for some context, what's proposed on this site at the end of Oakland, right where Oakland meets the CN Rail Trail, or sorry, the CN Rail, is a 113 unit apartment building, 6 stories of units, 5.5 story building, just to correct one note in the report. The site has 11.3 meters of frontage on Oakland Ave. It also has a pedestrian access through to Highbury that you can see in the map there. Area of about just over 3 hectares. Surrounding the apartment buildings and the proposed apartment building are a number of low-density residential uses. There's a park space immediately across from the entrance to the site, and there's also the railway tracks to the northwest of the site. And on the opposite side of the rail tracks, you're seeing a mix of commercial industrial type uses, and the Legion as well. So there's a bit of planning history on this site with regards to the official plan and zoning. The place type applied through the London plan is neighborhoods, and the place type, or sorry, the designation from the 1989 official plan was and remains low-density residential. The existing zoning that's in place on the site is a holding residential R8 special provision zone that was established through a zoning bylaw amendment in April of 2016. It was at that point in time that the H5, which requires public site plan holding provision, was applied, and that's why we're here this evening. There are a couple regulations of note with regards to the special provisions that came in at that point in time. They included they provide that 264 parking spaces are to be provided, and they also provide for that limited frontage just based on the access from Oakland. At that time, the applicant was also seeking to have townhouses on the site. The proposal has changed, but those uses were permitted through that rezoning. Subsequent to that, in August of 2018, the minor variance was sought to permit a height of 17.3 meters, and that was granted with conditions around providing for noise and future recognition that the CN operations would continue. So there's two site plans for you. They're both available in the report as well. This one shows the entirety of the site, just because there is some additional parking proposed in the north, adjacent to those two, the kind of, other than the new one that's highlighted in the thicker black line in the, what is the bottom left corner of the site, or the southeast. The other apartment buildings shown are existing 3-story apartments. So this is an enlarged site that shows, enlarged site plan that shows specifically where the development's occurring. You'll see the kind of looped parking around the exterior of the site that moves the apartment building away from the residential low-density uses that surround the site. This site plan doesn't show the landscaping, but there is a number of buffering landscaping and some existing trees that are proposed. Following that up, just elevations of the new proposed dwelling. You'll note, the new proposed building. You'll note the low kind of half story for the bottom level that reduces the overall height of the building. And that's the west elevation, which is not dissimilar from the east. Notice was provided in 2 ways for this one, through application to property owners in the surrounding area as is standard, and in the Londoner. As of the writing of the report, and as of when I checked my email on the way to this meeting, we still hadn't received anything in writing from the public. So the recommendation in front of you is to let us know if there's any concerns before we follow through with site plan approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maitland. I'd like to go to the applicant. Please. If you can just turn on your microphone. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of Planning Committee. My name is Carol Wiebe with MHBC Planning. I'm here this afternoon on behalf of Bluestone Properties. Also from Bluestone in the public gallery are Colin Beerbaum and Marty Turgeon, in case there's any specific questions that you may have to the property owner. I have a couple of slides which I think will help inform the committee and any members of the public on the evolution of the site plan that's before you this evening. As you can see, the air photo shows the property. Highbury is on the right-hand side, and as staff indicated, the CN rail line is on the top part of the screen. And there are a number of existing buildings, apartment buildings, low-rise apartments that have been there for many years. And you can see that there's still a fair bit of green space surrounding those apartment buildings. The main vehicular access is in off of Oakland, and there's a very well-used pedestrian connection over to Highbury. As staff pointed out, this application was subject to a zoning amendment initiated in 2015 and ultimately approved by council in the spring of 2016. And the purpose of that rezoning was to allow for additional uses on the site other than apartment buildings. And at that time, Bluestone was thinking that they were interested in providing both townhomes and stacked townhomes to appeal to a broader demographic than what was currently people that were residing on the property. As part of that zoning bylaw amendment, we conducted a neighborhood information meeting in advance of the statutory public meeting and had a very good turnout. And then we also had the statutory public meeting. And some of the concerns that were raised by the neighborhood were traffic and really the loss of green space. But we explained at that point in time that we felt that the site was certainly large enough that it could accommodate additional intensification, and that the form of development that was being proposed was still compatible and in keeping with the generally low-rise residential neighborhood. Since that bylaw was approved in 2016, Bluestone has been doing their own market research to try and really gauge, what is the type of housing product that is most needed. And the majority of the inquiries that they've been getting, not just on this site, but on a number of their other properties, has been for apartments. And the primary reason, certainly as it relates to Oakland, is the accessibility, the elevator and the single-level housing. And I'll just show you, I'll try. This is not. Oh, okay. So as I mentioned, this was the site plan that was presented back in 2016 for the rezoning, and you can see that in the light tone are the existing apartment buildings, and in the darker tone, you can see Building D, which is the proposed apartment building, which is again generally in the same location as what is currently being proposed. And there were a series of traditional two-story townhomes as well as some stacked townhomes, really interspersed throughout the balance of the site where it's currently open space. And as I said, the concern, certainly from the residents surrounding, was the loss of green space. Not so much that they used it, but just the visual impact of, they were used to seeing a very green and lowly dense, less dense developed site, and they were just concerned that there was going to be more people and loss of privacy. As I said, since then, what Bluestone has found is that the majority of the interest that they're getting on this site is for apartments, primarily because it does have an elevator, it's accessible, and a number of the residents that are currently living in some of their existing buildings that don't have elevators would like to have that ability to stay here, but are aging and want the ability to have that option. Oh, went too fast. So this is the current, and I apologize, the orientation is a little, it's the opposite of the previous. But you can see, this is the current proposal that's before you this afternoon, and you can see there is still a single apartment building. It has been increased in size over what was previously shown back in 2016. And really what that means is all the residential units that were proposed in the townhomes, the stacked towns and the traditional towns have now just been consolidated into the single building. And there's been some expansion of the surface parking, but certainly the north half of the site will remain undeveloped. And this site at present cannot accommodate any additional units without exceeding the permitted density on the site. There's a couple of dimensions on this site plan which are a little difficult to decipher, but I can tell you that from the new apartment building to the closest property line along Highbury, and those are really the properties that are closest to this building, to the property line, the closest is 24 meters or about 78 feet. That's just to the fence line. And then the closest distance from the new building to the rear of the nearest house is 40 meters. And again, that's 131 feet. So there's still significant separation distance, both to the existing property line, rear property line. And as you can see, those homes along Highbury and along Wilton have ample backyards. So again, the concern that some people may have in terms of privacy and overlook are certainly mitigated by the separation distance. And as staff said, there will be a concerted effort to pay particular attention to perimeter landscaping and screening for this. And then the last slide, you saw this is just a rendering that will give you an idea of the sort of the appearance of the building. As staff pointed out, there's a half a level down. So in total, there are 6 levels of residential units, but the building itself is 5.5 stories in total height from grade. So that concludes my presentation. If there's any questions, I'd be pleased to answer them.
Thank you. I'd like to go to the committee for any technical questions of the applicant and of staff. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Ms. Wiebe. Through you, Madam Chair, I think to staff, so that was going to be my question. I think Ms. Wiebe answered it in saying that they cannot add additional units without exceeding the permitted density. So, so the initial towns that were proposed back in 2016 with the apartment building, now those units have been transferred into the apartment building, and that uses up the density allocations. And just look for confirmation from staff that that's accurate.
If we could get confirmation?
Thank you. Through the chair, that's correct. This pretty much maximizes it without seeking further Planning Act permissions.
Thank you. I see no further technical questions, so I would like to go up to the gallery, to the public, and starting here on my left, asking if there's anyone here that would like to speak to this application. And just moving along, if there's anyone here that would like to speak to this application. And I'll ask one more time if there's anyone that would like to speak to this application. And I see none. I would like a motion to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Turner, second by Councillor Cassidy.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
And I'd like to go to the committee for a discussion. Councillor Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Thank you. Through the chair, I wonder, in terms of the buffering around the edges between the proposed apartment building and the related parking lot and the existing residential, if our staff could just speak to what the width of that buffer is. It's not totally clear. It looks like it's pretty consistent around the south and the east boundary, but maybe not so much along the northern part of that parcel, not where the new building is going, but where there's existing.
Through the chair, the distance from the edge of the parking to the property line, it varies depending on which side, but it's 3.9, 3.5, and 4.5 depending. And there is landscaping provided in that buffer, and all but one location where we decide not to provide low perimeter landscaping, or the landscape architect decided so as to protect the existing trees at that location.
Thank you. So could you give me a sense of how this landscaping would look once, you know, these things that are going to be planted have grown into sort of maturity along the, say, the south and east boundaries, so along Wilton and along Highbury?
If you can just give me a moment. The applicant did provide a subsequent submission in the last week, so we are looking at it at a new submission at the moment. For the majority of the perimeter, it's shade trees with, unfortunately I'm not finding it. It is some sort of low shrubbery and or other kind of flowered plantings. Let me see here. Yeah, that's generally speaking what it is. The portion where they're seeking to protect the most trees is in the southwest corner of that enlarged area. So the back of the Oakland properties is where most of the tree preservation that we were able to achieve was done. And then through the rest, we're looking at plantings and new trees.
Thank you. And colleagues who were around planning committee at the time we dealt with this original application, who remember that the members of the public who turned out at that meeting, a lot of their concern was around the buffering between, you know, what was going to be built, and not so much the townhouses, but this apartment building, which at the time was 4 stories. And based on what I'm seeing here in terms of the buffering, I think it's going to be a good idea. You know, I'm not sure, I'm surprised that there aren't people here talking about the height difference between what we had before us a couple of years ago and what we have now. But I think people will like the idea that there's one building rather than a whole bunch of buildings that are being proposed. And, you know, the difference between the 6-story, keep in mind, anyone who's not familiar with the site, it's quite a bit down from the grade of what's on Highbury, for example. So it's not going to present quite like 6 stories to the residences that are up there on Highbury.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Maitland. In the report, 4.4 has outstanding site plan comments as of December 20th, 2018. Have those been materially satisfied, or is there anything that we need to be incorporating into the recommendations that we send back to you?
I can answer that through the chair. As Mr. Maitland indicated, we did just receive a submission from the applicant, and it looks like a lot of these have been satisfied. To that end, we would still make sure that they are satisfied prior to site plan approval anyhow. So we wouldn't be making any recommendations to the approval authorities until those outstanding comments were made, or addressed, sorry.
Thank you. And with that, I'd like to have a motion to receive this recommendation. Deputy Mayor Helmer and Councillor Cassidy seconding.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
And moving on to the next public participation meeting, we have one at 440 Clark Road. And I'd like a motion to open up the public participation meeting. Moved by Councillor Cassidy, second by Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. And I'd like to go to Mr. Corby to present the staff application.
Perfect. Thank you, Mrs. Chair, Madam Chair. All right, so the subject site is located at 440 Clark Road. This is just north of Dundas Street, and it's part of a large commercial node. The main use out there is the Home Depot, and this is just west of that building. Here's a better view of the surrounding area. You can see to the south is the extension of the commercial node, as well as going to the east down Clark Road. So the nature of this application, it's for an official plan amendment to add a specific area policy in combination with a bonus zone. These combined will permit a 4-story, 18-meter apartment building with a total of 65 residential units and 65 parking spaces. Here's a conceptual site plan of the property. You can see the building's been brought forward to Clark Road with no parking in front of it. All the parking's included in the rear, out of sight from Clark Road. And then here's a rendering from the intersection and entrance to the commercial property along Clark Road. So the proposed apartment is currently not a permitted use in the existing new format regional commercial node designation. Within the London plan, these lands are designated as a shopping area place type. This place type seeks to intensify and infill these areas through the introduction of mid-rise residential developments within these existing centers. Through the current 1985 official plan, it provides council the ability to apply policies for specific areas. The adoption of policies for specific areas may be considered where the change in land use is site-specific and is located in an area where council wishes to maintain the existing land use designations while allowing for site-specific use. Recognizing that mid-rise apartments are part of the vision of future shopping areas and that the key directions within the London plan promote affordable housing along with infill and intensification, the use of a special area policy is appropriate. It would be site-specific, and the existing exclusive commercial policies do not accurately reflect the intent of council with respect to the future use of the land. In terms of intensity, through the requested zoning amendment, they are seeking an R8 zone. This has a maximum density of 75 units per hectare. The applicant has applied to increase this density above that 75 to 95 units per hectare through the bonus zone. The proposed development qualifies for bonus zoning in conformity to the policies of the official plan by providing high-quality building design along with the 65 affordable housing units proposed. In terms of the form of the development, as part of the application, the proposal was required to go through urban design staff and the urban design peer review panel. Both the panel and staff were very pleased with the proposed apartment form and design. The applicant further refined the design based on some suggestions from the panel. These were minor in nature, but they did take it on to make the design even more appropriate. Staff feels the recommended design is in keeping with the guidelines of Chapter 11 in the current official plan, as well as the city design policies of the London Plan. In terms of the affordable housing for this development, Zarin is pre-qualified with the Housing Development Corporation and has been working with them as well as the city and others to assist in the planning of this proposed development. The related affordability considerations are subject to future project approvals and funding from HDC or other governments. These approvals are not yet in place, and Zarin will continue to work with HDC outside of the requested amendment. The proposed zoning decision is the first step in the applicant's process to receiving the future funding. So staff is recommending approval of the requested special or specific area policy and bonus zone. We feel it's consistent with the provincial policy statement, City of London official plan policies, and the shopping area place type within the London Plan. It provides for affordable housing, results in the development of an underutilized site, and provides an appropriate form of development while ensuring high quality design standard is achieved. Thank you.
Thank you. Any technical questions? Councillor Turner.
Thank you. Really quickly, I might have missed it in the report, but is the zoning approval here with the bonusing contingent upon the successful application of or receipt of the affordable housing itself, or if the affordable housing component doesn't come through through its support, does this zoning remain in place?
Through you, Madam Chair. The zoning will remain in place if the zoning if the affordable housing falls through. The zoning has to be in place and finalized for them to be able to apply for funding. So it is a bonus zone, so you can only develop what is in there, and the bonus zone does read 65 affordable apartment units are required.
Thank you for that question. Councillor Turner.
Sorry, just for a quick I think that's what you said at the end. So in order to achieve the bonusing, in order for that to persist, they must be affordable units. So they could not, the zoning will be in place, but they could not develop it as non-affordable with that, that zoning in place and the bonusing.
Through the chair, so the interpretation of the zoning time would be related to the affordable housing units. That means funded, municipally funded affordable housing units. If that's not in place, then the zoning can't be achieved.
Thank you for that clarification. And if I could just add a technical question, just following up on the affordable units, do we know what they are now? I know in the presentation, I heard that it's going to be decided in the future. If you could just expand a little bit as to how that process will look like. Because when we talk about affordable units, does that mean 95% under the market value, or is it 80, or how does the process move forward after we grant the, it gets zoned for affordable housing?
Madam Chair. So the applicant will have to work with the Housing Development Corporation. I'm not aware of all the process after that. Stephen is here if you want him to answer that question.
If I could ask that question, Mr. Justasia.
Thank you. Through the chair, I want to separate out the land use and the affordability and the eligibility. There's different programs out there. When you're talking about 95% of affordability, I think you're referencing the past zoning that was done with the Section 37 bonuses. That would be a minimum. Using the scenario that Councillor Turner just indicated, that would be a minimum based on it not being an affordable development through government funding specifically. I think the zoning, though, needs to be able to be seen on its own. If it's funded units, then it is subject to the definition of affordable is subject to what program that would be under. The federal government has programs with definitions of around 80% average. Ours are 70 and 80%. So those should be considered completely separate from this decision that you're making right now.
Thank you for that clarification. I'd like to go to the applicant then. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Harry Frusios. I'm with Zelenka Priamo Limited. We are the planning consultants for Zarin Development Corporation, who has this application before you this evening to get the required official plan and zoning amendment for the housing development. Just want to introduce also members from Zarin Development Corporation that are with us to this evening. To my left is Paul Fitzgeorge and Ron Rowbottom. They are members of the board. Paul is the president and Ron is the secretary, and they're here this evening to monitor the proceedings of Planning Committee. And just to give you a bit of a brief background, Zarin Development Corporation is a London-based charitable nonprofit developer and manager of affordable housing units in the province, and they've done so for over 40 years. The proposed development at 440 Clark Road would be their second development in London, the first being at 303 Commissioners Road West. That was established in 1984, and it is known as Zarin Place, which is a 40-unit seniors housing complex. So Zarin has a high level of experience and commitment in providing affordable housing units in the community. I want to thank staff, in particular, for working with us throughout this process and bringing forward a positive staff report. It's been a very good process in working with staff, with the Urban Design Panel, and with HDC to bring forward this positive recommendation this afternoon. And I also want to thank the members of the public for their support throughout the process, and in particular through their involvement at the open house. We heard a lot of encouraging remarks about this proposed development, and we're very happy to see it move forward. We wish to advise committee that we are in support of the staff recommendation to approve the 4-story building with 65 units this evening. This proposed development would address a pressing need in the community to provide affordable housing units should it go through, subject to available funding. This property is ideal. It's vacant. It's underutilized. It is within walking distance to major transit routes, to shopping facilities. The building and the overall site design have been carefully considered to address the needs of not only the tenants, the future tenants, the Inova Women's Shelters to the north, and the city's urban design objectives, which were discussed by staff earlier. So the proposed development and the amendments requested are consistent with the provincial policy statement and both the current and the London plan in terms of the proposed development. So we ask committee to support the recommendation and look forward to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any technical questions of the applicant? I see none. So I will go to the public. And starting again here on my left side, is there anyone here that would like to speak to this application? And just moving along, if there's anyone here, again, that would like to speak to this application. And one more time. If there's anyone here that would like to speak to the application, I see none. I'd like a motion to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Turner and Councillor Cassidy. And sorry, I'd just like to mention there is an amendment, the Appendix B to the original recommendation. There's been a change, and the change, if you go down to permitted use, it's adding apartment building that was not put on the original page.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
And if I can have any comments from the committee. Welcome, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to preface my comments by saying, I was warned that planning committee meetings go extremely long, but you are making a speedy work of this agenda tonight. So I'm sure that everybody appreciates that so that they can get home for dinner. Of course, this proposed development at 440 Clark Road is in Ward 2. I just wanted to be here today to share with the committee members how frankly excited members of the community are about this potential build. The open house that was hosted in December had over 50 people in attendance, and every single comment was favorable. The developers and Zelenka Priamo have done an excellent job of informing the community. The faster we can get this approved and get shovels in the ground, the happier people will be. I know that there are several seniors in my ward who are looking forward to putting forward their applications to be tenants. One of the things that we didn't hear is that these units are being designed so that there will be accessible washroom units in it, which is very important for people who are getting up in years and may have a little bit of a hard time getting in and out of the tub and things like that. So having looked at the designs, I'm just delighted with this development and happy to express my support for it.
Thank you for those comments, and I do want to say that this is very unusual for, to have such a short agenda at the Planning Committee. Anyone else? Councillor Squire.
Through you, this is obviously a very good development, and the developers should be really commended. This is something that we need in the City of London, and we're not obviously seeing enough of, which is properties designed like this. It's still not clear to me, and perhaps it's just me, of how the Affordable Housing Corporation is involved. Is the Affordable Housing Corporation funding this? Are you providing capital? Are you waiting an application? I know it's separate from the zoning matter, but I wouldn't mind understanding what your involvement is.
Mr. Justasia?
Okay. Through the chair, the approach that's used is that they are pre-qualified bidders. So what we have done is, because the nature of funding has changed, especially the move towards federal government funding, we have become much more involved earlier in the process. So the Zarin Group has pre-qualified with us. They spoke right from the beginning about their interests. What we do is we then are able to assist them in navigating, whether it's through the work with the city or whether it's through creating a pro forma for the whole building that will actually function, so that as they are doing the work in the building, it actually is getting them closer to something that will meet all of the application criteria for whether it's federal government programming or for whether it's our own programming. So rather than having to guess at the end and go through that process alone, and then apply to an RFP or a request for proposal, what we do is we get involved earlier in the process, and we make sure that as the building is developing, that they know both the physical requirements of the building, so it's meeting the guidelines that we have related to the physical attributes that we want to see in an affordable development. It meets the financial attributes that we want to see in the development, so it's aligning with whether it's a federal, provincial program or even our own funding. We just want to be very clear that this is a natural part of the process. It doesn't mean that they are yet funded. So that's the only distinction that we're making, is they're here for the zoning on the land as part of a process of continuing to work with us.
Councillor Squire.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and that's something good to know, that you're working with people on this basis, because obviously a lot of people may want to get into the affordable housing area, but they don't know how to do it. They don't know what they have to build and all the requirements. So I think to know that you're doing that to help, I think is a really valuable thing, and we shouldn't just think of you as someone who writes a check at some part in the process.
If I could, through the chair, just one brief comment that I should say is that the other thing that we do is we work in very close partnership with both development services and with planning. So if anyone is coming forward to planning, development services, or even to the concierge at the front desk talking about affordable housing, right from that initial point of contact, we're working on that. And that's where the tools that we're advancing and the processes that we're advancing are really being done together with planning and development services, so that when they have someone coming in saying affordable housing, that it actually means that, wait a second, are you working with HDC? What do you mean by affordable housing? We've got those set parameters in place.
So I was really glad I gave you this opportunity to make that public service announcement today. So I will be expecting you to treat me really very nicely. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's a good conversation to have when we talk about affordable housing and what exactly we're doing here tonight, approving the zoning, and what it's going to look like. It is to be determined, but it is exciting when we have applications coming forward with promoting affordable housing. It's a good thing for the city. And I just want to thank staff and the applicant for working together to alleviate some of the concerns from the community. I know reading the report, there were a number of concerns, and it looks like they've all been dealt with, and thank you for that. Need a motion here. Deputy Mayor Helmer. Please.
Thank you. Through the chair, perhaps it's a question for the applicants. I'm not sure, but what I see here proposed is a very nicely designed building in a really underutilized parcel of land. I think it's a really great idea to have the affordable housing, but it's also entirely affordable housing, and there's no commercial units whatsoever in what is a pretty large commercial area. And so I wonder if the applicant wanted to comment on that. I'm not opposed to the application. I think it's a perfectly fine zoning for the land we're talking about. And I think the development idea is a good idea. But I'm a little concerned that we are, through the incentives through affordable housing and our own process, what we're getting is, you know, charitable organizations that do affordable housing proposing buildings that are entirely affordable housing and nothing else. And private developers who are very reluctant to incorporate affordable housing into their developments. And what I think we'd like to get to is a place where, in an area where you could have commercial on the ground floor, affordable housing on top, and, you know, some market rent units in there as well, that's more sustainable in the long run. I know a lot of affordable housing developers don't really want to be commercial landlords. That's not their business. They don't want to get into that. But in terms of the built form and what's actually getting built, you know, I do think that when we have these opportunities in a commercial area to have commercial on the ground floor, we should be looking at that. We had something similar happen with the London Affordable Housing Corporation, you know, on Dundas Street, where they're looking at 42 units, and but it's been designed to be converted to commercial if that does happen. So I'm a little concerned with the zoning that's here. It's very prescriptive, saying 65 units. So even if it were to be converted sometime in the future, you'd have to come back and change zoning and things like that. So I just wanted to ask the applicant about their interest in any kind of commercial zoning at any part of the property, including the ground floor portion, because it seems like an opportunity there. And I know it's not your business based on what you do, but I wanted to ask about it.
Through you, Madam Chair, as you said, Councillor Helmer, I mean, they're not typically in the business of providing the commercial units on the ground floor. But the way the zoning is structured is that the bonusing applies to this development only. That in the zoning bylaw, there's also going to be provision for mixed-use building to occur if this doesn't happen, which would require actually the permitted uses, which would be commercial, obviously be on the ground floor, and then residential above. So if this particular development doesn't go through, as bonus, there's still opportunity to build a mixed-use building on the property. But unfortunately, no, I can say with some level of comfort that they're not considering commercial uses on the ground floor for this project.
And if I may, just following up, could I ask that question of staff? Is there anything that is preventing us from allowing affordable housing but mixing it with commercial? Is there anything there that would prevent that?
Through the chair, so nothing is preventing that kind of arrangement. The London plan actually calls for a mixed-use compact city as we continue to grow going forward. I think what we're going to find as the affordable housing sector continues to evolve, we're going to sort of see over time the progression where we're going to have more mixing of uses that will occur. The context that Councillor Helmer spoke to is a little bit different than Main Street area along Dundas. It's a little different than what's on Clark Road going forward. But as we continue to see the economics change and certain areas develop, I think we're going to be seeing more of that in the future.
Thank you. And I'd like to look to the committee for a motion to accept the recommendation that we have in front of us. Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on, items for direction. We've got two requests here for delegation status. One for 894 Adelaide Street North, and the other one is for 131 King Street. I'm not sure how the committee would like to deal with the delegation request. If you would like to take one at a time, combine them. I'm not, one at a time. Councillor Turner?
Madam Chair, our past practice has typically been to receive these and refer them to a subsequent PEC meeting. I think two things kind of inform that decision for us tonight. One is staff's ability to respond to these requests at this time, or whether they'd like to prepare information for us at the next meeting. And the second would be the extent or weight of the next meeting, and how much that might impact the agenda at that point.
Okay, for that, I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, so we are, of course, at committee's disposal. What I will say is that getting things ready for the 19th would be a little taxing for 2 reports in particular. We currently have 9 reports that we're working on. We've had a surge of applications in the new year that my staff's quite diligently working on, and we're slightly short-staffed at the moment too. Reports would be due basically the end of day Friday to put together. So I guess it would depend on the nature of what information council or committee and council would like information on in order to make the decision. We're at your disposal on that.
Councillor Turner, or I'll go to Councillor Cassidy.
So, Madam Chair, we have done that in the past where there have been requests for delegation status, but these particular kinds of delegations where we allow this to go through to the Committee of Adjustment for a minor variance, and where we allow staff to process an application for an official plan amendment when the moratorium is in place. Those particular kinds of delegations, we generally hear them at the meeting where the request is on the agenda. So I'm happy to go forward with hearing these, and since they are 2 different kinds of delegations, although they are the same representative for each one, I think we should hear them separately, and I'm in favor of hearing them here and now, considering that these are the last items on this agenda.
So I'd like to just follow up on Councillor Cassidy's comments and ask staff, what is the process that we've taken in the past with these requests?
Through the chair, council doesn't have a formally adopted process on this. A convention's developed, though, whereby, as Councillor Turner mentioned, the delegation request be received. We would then come forward at a future meeting with information in a report. Of course, we can't be providing you with advice on this that would prejudge the applications. The information report is factual in nature, consisting of planning policy and history on the file, the applicable policy framework as well for the request. That's the kind of information we'd be providing in the setup that we have.
So I'd like to just follow up with a quick question from the chair, if I may, and maybe is there an opportunity to get a report back by the 19th, which is the next meeting, with a condensed version of a report to the committee?
Through the chair, we could provide you with a condensed report. Just for a bit of context, the report that we brought forward related to the mushroom farm at the last meeting, that was 10 pages long. So we'd be looking at something quite a bit trim compared to that. So as long as the committee's comfortable with that, that would be what we'd be looking at.
If I may, I would like to ask a question if there is an urgency here, if it can wait until the next planning meeting. No, the applicant is here. If the committee would allow that question, I'm open. I see, yes, if the applicant is here and, or through staff, to understand the urgency of that this has to be done immediately.
Through the chair, Mr. Kirkness might be able to speak to this a bit better than I can. My understanding is that both applicants have progressed through site plan, recognize they're making some slight tweaks to their design at this point of their building. That needs to be fulfilled before site plan approval can be finalized. I know that the spring is quickly approaching and many developers or builders are eager to get in the ground for that time period. So I imagine that's why you're having these requests here tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate the response from staff then. So to help the committee move along with making the decision, I guess, going back to, there is a request for delegation status. And if the committee would like to give a comment here. We've heard that there is a possibility of a report coming back to us, not in detail, for the next planning meeting, which is February the 19th. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
I'm going to move that we hear the delegations at the next meeting. I think both of the issues are relatively straightforward, and so I'm not sure that we really require a great deal of information from our staff, but I think as a matter of process, it's appropriate to get a report from our staff. I don't know what I don't know in terms of some of these implications. I don't think it's going to be a big deal. I would like to see a sort of slimmed down report. We're really just deciding about whether we want to allow it to go to Committee of Adjustment. And as long as that's not going to unduly slow things down, which, you know, between now and the next meeting is not very long, it seems reasonable. The letter from Mr. Kirkness for the first one is on the 25th of January. So it seems like that's pretty fast to be dealing with something on the 19th of February in terms of planning committee speed. So, you know, I think that's pretty reasonable. If that's when we're actually dealing with the delegation and we make a decision there, then there's the committee process. So unless I hear something from the applicant saying, oh, I've got a deadline I got to meet, where we really can't hear it, I think there's reason to just wait till the next cycle. I think that's appropriate. So I'll move that and see if there's a seconder.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Turner, and I'd like to go to Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question first, through you to staff. For the second letter, it's about, you know, and we've done this a few times, about directing staff to process the application. For that particular one, I would like to know when the moratorium ends. So when the 2-year period ends, that would just make it a matter of course that you would receive the application to amend the official plan and just process the application without coming to us first.
Through the chair, so Mr. Kirkness is a capable man. I'm going to trust his dates on the letter. November 20th, 2018 was when the application was approved by council, so it would be November 21st, 2020 for the 2-year.
Okay, and through you, Madam Chair, to staff, these are two different letters. Are they, so they're both represented by Mr. Kirkness. Are they the same applicant for both of these?
Through the chair, my understanding is they're not.
So, Madam Chair, you know, I'll see where this vote goes. I wonder if we could possibly vote on both delegation requests separately, because I'm actually in favor of hearing a report from staff on the first letter, and because I like to have that staff report before we decide whether or not this should go to the Committee of Adjustment rather than coming to council. For the second letter, I would be happy to hear from the applicant or from Mr. Kirkness, which I believe is what we've done in the past for these kinds of things, is because we had the Chinmaya mission as an example. I don't remember that we had a staff report. I believe the applicant came to us and asked us for staff to receive the application and begin processing the application rather than wait for that 2 years to finish. So that's what I would like to do. I would like to vote in favor of hearing the delegation on the first matter, the Adelaide Street matter, at a future meeting with a staff report. But I would be in favor of hearing the delegation on the King Street matter tonight. So if we could vote on those separately, I would.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy. I'd like to go to Councillor Turner. There is a motion on the floor, just to remind committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Councillor Cassidy's point, the reason why we defer these to subsequent meetings is to allow staff to provide commentary and context with respect to the request that's being made for us. We could hear the delegations tonight, but we wouldn't be equipped to make a decision on those matters until we had the response, the companion response from staff. So I think it's immaterial whether we hear it now or next planning committee meeting, other than the fact that the delegation becomes divorced from the commentary from staff. And it's usually best to have those two as companions to each other at the same time, which is why I think it's best to maintain the practice that we have in the past.
Councillor Squire.
There was through you, Madam Chair, there's a question asked earlier about urgency, and we were going to get Mr. Kirkness to comment on that, and he didn't have a chance. I know staff did, but I would like to, if it's possible, to hear what Mr. Kirkness says. This may solve the problem. If they can wait till the next meeting, then let's wait till the next meeting.
Okay, if the committee is in agreement, I would like to ask Mr. Kirkness that question. Welcome, Mr. Kirkness, and the question is there an urgency to make a decision here?
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I have Ali Soufan with me in both matters, both proponents. They're both different. They both want to be in the ground as soon as possible. One has 9 apartments, the other one has 266. Quite a difference. But Ali is saying he definitely wants to try to start digging that hole at 131 King Street in March. And or his development team is saying, you know, we are just kind of pulling everything to try and get him there. Of course, a minor variance takes about 60 days. We would therefore like to kind of get moving with that right away. But at the same time, Ali is understanding of process and procedure, would appreciate being able to move forward. It isn't the end of the world that we have to come back on February the 19th. But if you could see fit to hear us tonight, it's a pretty simple matter. We would sure appreciate it.
Thank you. And again, I just appreciate the comments that we've just heard from Mr. Kirkness. I do want to ask a quick question here from the chair to staff. Is there going to be an opportunity to make a decision here at planning on the application on King Street in particular on the 19th?
Through the chair, so the decision that would be before you on the 19th would be whether or not you're going to grant the minor variance request, not whether you're going to grant the minor variance. That would go to the Committee of Adjustment.
Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Bet you Councillor Lewis is regretting mentioning that the meeting was moving along so quickly. So the second one, 131 King Street, are we talking about a minor variance application or a ZBA application? Because the letter says ZBA, it doesn't say minor variance. And I think we need to get clarity on that because I know the one is for 894 Adelaide is a minor variance. It doesn't seem that the other one is, but maybe I'm misreading your letter, Mr. Kirkness.
If I could go to staff.
Through the chair, I think Mr. Kirkness would have to ask what the request is before committee, or answer what the request is before committee, whether it is a minor variance or a rezoning. My understanding is from the letter it would be for a minor variance.
Mr. Kirkness? So both of them are for minor variance. Councillor Cassidy.
Okay, so that clarifies things, because the letter does talk about a zoning bylaw amendment. And to me, that meant let staff begin processing that application, and then it would come back to us for a decision at some later point, which is why I was in favor of doing that now. instructing staff to proceed with processing the application. I concur with the committee, and I'm willing to go along with what Deputy Mayor Helmer and Councillor Turner are moving.
Councillor Squire.
I would have been happy to proceed tonight largely because we're not adjudicating on the merits of the matter. We're just sending it to another determining body. So the decision is whether it's appropriate to do that. But that given the urgency of the matter, I'm willing to take that leap of faith that they could properly adjudicate it. So, but obviously I'm in the minority on that, and I'll have to deal with that.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to share with committee members, based on my own experience over the last 4 years, that you are probably adding anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks for an application to get on the Committee of Adjustments schedule for a hearing, if you decide ultimately to send it to there. So just advising you that it's not only the delay until the next Planning Committee meeting, but also the delay then to get on the Committee of Adjustments schedule.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Lewis. So I know this is not an easy one. I guess there's a lot to consider here. And again, we haven't heard the delegation that's requests that started this, is to start this process, even though I appreciate the comments from the applicant to help us make this decision. We understand that we could have a report, not in detail, coming back to us on the 21st, or the 19th, sorry, where we can accept the delegation at that time. So we do have a motion on the floor, and if we could just take a look at it. So we are doing one at a time here, and the first one is for 894 Adelaide Street to, okay. I guess the suggestion is to have both of them together. While we're waiting, I'd like to go to Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know clerks had heard my earlier comments about separating them, so I apologize if this is adding to the delay. Having heard from Councillor Lewis and the length of time that this is going to delay this, you know, and I take all of these on a case-by-case basis. There have been a couple of these that have come before us that I haven't supported going straight to the Committee of Adjustment. I felt like they needed to come here first. Having read the letters and really being in favor of hearing the delegations tonight, but it doesn't look like we're going to. I'm not in favor of adding a 6-week delay to either one of these projects, so I won't be supporting the motion that the delegation be heard at a later meeting. I would prefer to hear it tonight.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
We're really talking about whether we hear the delegation now or hear delegation 2 weeks from now. It makes no difference about the Committee of Adjustment schedule because it has to go to Committee of Adjustment one way or the other. Either it's going to go or it's not. If it does go, it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks, and we're not talking about making that go any faster. We're talking about whether we approve it now. So 4 to 6 weeks plus 2 weeks, or 4 to 6 weeks. That's the difference, it's just 2 weeks.
And I'd just like to make a comment from the chair on the motion. I'll be supporting the motion just because I think it's important that we do have some consistency. It would be great if we had a process in place. I know we don't have a process in place, but I'll be supporting the motion for consistency.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3 to 2.
Thank you. I'd like to go to deferred matters. Additional business? I see none. And I'd like to ask for adjournment. Councillor Turner? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Helmer. And with that, we are adjourned.